Everybody, I am still seeing something on my screen. It says start webinar now.
Just keep talking.
Just keep talking. I'm being told to just keep talking. But I'm actually kind of glad that that thing is there in front of me because I can't see myself. I saw myself earlier and I decided I need to have a haircut. Anyways, I want to welcome everybody to this webinar. We had such great success with the last one where we reviewed the big education reform bill. And as you know, I've been trying to keep up with these weekly updates, and we thought, this might be a good way just maybe to continue these webinars. We're calling them webinars, but actually they're not webinars in the true sense where I am only presenting the information to you. We really want this to be a conversation. And so we really want to use these webinars more like a meeting, that we're actually meeting and we're just talking about what happened at the State House the week before. Get your questions, your comments. Really encourage you to look on your screen where you can actually type in those questions or comments that you might have, so that this can be more of a conversation rather than me being the only one just to kind of educate you on the issues. Really want to hear from you as well. So we thought we'd try this format this week just to see how it goes, and maybe we can make this a weekly thing, and really want to get your comments about that as well. I'm still going to be emailing the legislative updates and the daily updates as I can, but wanted to, again, try this format to hear from you and get your reaction to this. So I want to kind of share, just start now, kind of what's been going on with this big education reform bill. As you know, there is a bill in the House and in the Senate. They're both the same bills. One's a Senate bill, one's a House bill, and they're moving in both chambers, and there are different things that are happening with that bill depending on whether you're in the House or in the Senate. But the South Carolina Career Opportunity and Access for All Act is in the House, and it is actually was put on a pretty fast train this past week. The subcommittee had amended the bill and had a full committee this past Wednesday where the full committee took it up. They went over the subcommittee amendment, and then they amended it further, and then they passed it out. So we are going to see that bill hit the House floor tomorrow, Tuesday, and be taken up by the House, where it will likely get out of a House by the end of the week. That is what I'm predicting. So it wants to be done. Now, the week before last, the Speaker was joined by the Senate Chairman, Education Chairman Greg Hembry, Molly Spearman, State Superintendent, the Governor, and I think that was it, to basically announce that in the House, on the House side, the Speaker wanted to get this bill out to the floor and out before the budget process starts. And of course, that budget process will begin next week, which, by the way, coincides with our TUDAC, our first 2 days at the Capitol. So really, really would love to see a lot of school board members attend this event next Wednesday. Be a great time because the House will be taking up that budget on the House floor. So we will be able to have input on that. And I'm going to talk to you about the budget in just a minute, but I want to first tell you, go back to the education bill in terms of it being on the House floor this week. So it was amended. It was not amended in the areas that we had asked for by a lot. So basically, just to kind of review some of the amendments that's been done by the House in its version of the bill. So just kind of some highlights. I'm not going to go through every amendment because there's a lot of them, but just kind of in the areas that we're concerned about. And I'm going to start with the school board ethics and the training requirement. Those sections that we had the first webinar on. In the House, primarily they amended it just to delete the imprisonment. So if we talked about you're going to be fined and face the possible imprisonment if you do not complete the required mandatory training that's now required in this bill. So they deleted the imprisonment fine, the fine of imprisonment. That's all they did to that section. They maintained a lot of what was in that bill that we had asked to change. It was very little change other than the imprisonment changes or whatever. That's now deleted. But you still face new fines, and also you have the ongoing training. Right now we have the only thing that's mandatory is new board training. In this bill they tweak it to say the new and ongoing, so it's not quite defined on what ongoing is, but there's apparently it's going to be some ongoing training as well, and you're going to be required to do, and they'll, the State Department will collect the records to make sure that you are doing that. But so that remains. And then also the new set basically of ethics provisions, you're already under, as we've said, you're already under the State Ethics Government Accountability Act. There's now new levels that are just for school board members. That is maintained. In addition, the nepotism policies that you are required to pass and adhere to, those remain in the House. Now, very differently in the Senate. In the Senate, under those sections of the bill, they have primarily stricken or deleted the training. They've left in the required training because that currently exists. So they left that in. But in terms of the new Code of Ethics, there is still the requirement that the state board provide a model policy and then provide the local boards with that model policy, which you would then adopt, as well as any other model policies that you want to have on ethics. Of course, that's up to you to have. But that's the only requirement. They struck out all of the new conflict of interest and the nepotism requirements. That's all gone in the Senate version. So for those of you in McCormick County who may be watching, as you know, the Senate is doing a series of meetings around the state on this bill, and they are going to be in McCormick tonight, actually, for its first public hearing. And if you attend that, I would encourage you to thank the Senate for hearing us and listening to us and actually inputting a lot of the changes that we asked for and striking those new requirements. And so to please pass along our thanks as well, but to make sure that you recognize that, I think that would be an important thing to do for you to do. Okay, in terms of the other big provisions of the bill, was the for the actions that can be employed for lower performing schools. We have real heartburn with the steps that can be taken by the state superintendent for schools that are rated below average and unsatisfactory. There is a series of things they can do now. It's actually part of the state's plan that's approved by the federal government, but schools that are rated below average or unsatisfactory, there's a lot of things that are triggered, like technical assistance, and there's a tiered technical assistance that the State Department actually employs. There's a requirement of a school improvement plan or a renewal plan, and that continues until it reaches a point where a school that's been declared unsatisfactory for several years, and then there are some other options that the State Superintendent of Education can now take. However, in the bill, all of the provisions for what they're now designating as chronically underperforming schools, those are schools that have been rated unsatisfactory for 3 of 4 years. The state superintendent is directed in this new law to employ one of a list of options. It's actually 3 options that can be deployed by the state superintendent, and they are all bad. That's the problem with this bill. There's no provision other than to basically reconstitute the school, which means they fire and rehire whoever they want in that school. They fire all staffs from the principal to the maintenance worker in that school. So The state superintendent has to employ that one. The other one is that they can, he or she can basically reconstitute the school and then turn it over to a education management organization, which is a nonprofit organization that comes in and basically operates the school, operates and directs the principal of the school, and basically just takes over the school. The third option under that scenario in the bill is that the school then is reconstituted as basically a charter school, and they bring in a charter school management organization to come in and again operate that school. And then finally, the other choice is that the school then be dissolved from the district, actually be removed from the district and put into what they call a state transformation school district. Just like we have a state charter school district, there would be a new district that would be formed, and it would be the transformation school district. There's currently a couple of states that have these. One is Tennessee and one is Louisiana. All of the research that has been done, not a nonpartisan research, let me just add, that's been done by a third party looking at the achievement of the schools in these districts. And when you look at the achievement district and then the schools that are in the traditional public schools districts, there is no correlation of higher student achievement in these transformation districts. Tennessee has had a lot of issues with this district, with their transformation district. They've had a lot of turnover. And there's actually been a moratorium on the schools that can be transferred into that transformation district. So the bottom line is this: there is no, quote unquote silver bullet in turning around low performing schools. It needs to be a recognition by the state that low performing schools, especially those that really struggle, it's much more than just what happens in that school. A lot of it is also in the community, in the home, and all of those combination of factors that help to challenge those schools, not help, challenge those schools. So we have asked, and we would encourage you all to continue talking with your House members as this bill goes to the floor. I'm sure there's going to be an amendment. We've asked for an amendment to be put up to eliminate these education management organizations, to eliminate the transformation school district, to allow the state superintendent to continue doing that tiered assessment. It's already been approved by the federal government. It's in the plan. Why are we recreating the wheel here? We've got to give this a chance, allow the state superintendent to employ those technical assistance options and provide that intensive technical assistance. If you're not going to do that, then we're asking that instead of just those drastic options, the only thing that the state superintendent can take are only drastic options, at least one other option be added to that list of things that says that the state superintendent can at least have the option to continue providing intense technical assistance, or at least take over the management of a school district, if you will, in terms of the operation of that district. That ought to be allowed under those kinds of scenarios. So that's what we are asking for, and we hope that you would do the same to at least tell your House members that if an amendment is offered, and I'm sure it will be, to be in support of that amendment. We cannot, allow a low performance rating that's based on basically a test score be used to employ such drastic measures and not have the measure at least to continue to provide more intensive technical assistance as again they can do now under the state approved plan by the feds. And the other option, or the other ask that we are asking for, if you will, is that there is nothing in that bill for these things for the local school board to be able to make an appeal. Under the accountability law that obviously needs to be updated, our state accountability law that we had been operating under for 20 years, the local board had the option to make an appeal to the state board if they feel that, that the takeover was done in a manner that was unfair, or that they could show. As we know, under accountability systems that we've been operating on, there's changes that are made. Maybe not every year, but there's changes that are made. There might be a change to a cut score on a standardized test, or they may tweak the way the formula is created. In those situations, then to have a hard and fast rule is, say, 3 or 4 years, when there might have been a change made that made it more difficult, then that's unfair. I mean, the state needs to recognize that if those changes are made in the accountability system that could impact a local district and its rating, that needs to be recognized. And that would be something, an example of a local board taking to the state board in appealing a decision, a drastic decision, such as a takeover. So we're also asking for that as well. Some other areas of interest that we've talked about in terms of this bill that have been, and let me just go back to say, for those areas, the Senate has not taken up that section yet. We will, of course, ask for the Senate when the Senate takes up the sections regarding technical assistance and takeovers of schools and districts. So we will be asking for that. So just know that the Senate has not taken that up. Again, for those of you in McCormick or in areas where the Senate is going to be having these community meetings, we will be getting this information out to you so that you can share with the Senate when they are traveling around the state. So in the Senate, I might just want to back up here just so to make sense here. The Senate is actually doing this bill in pieces, and they have not gotten to the piece yet about the takeover of technical assistance, and so again, that's what they're doing. We've also given you information, I believe, in Focus and in the legislative update, where we announce where the Senate is having these regional meetings, so that you can plan to attend if possible, and make sure that your voice is heard at the Senate hearings. All right. So in the other parts of the bill, just so you'll know where the House is at, in terms of the 0 to 20 committee, that's one that's a new state level committee. In the House, they just basically amended that section to allow for the appointees, 2 of the appointees that's in the bill that goes to this committee, to be either current or retired, high quality, highly effective teachers to serve on that 0 to 20 committee. It still would be under the governor, basically. They eliminated the word education czar, that the committee is headed by an education czar, replaced that with an executive director who's hired by the governor, as funds are available for that committee. In the Senate, in this particular section, they have introduced an amendment currently under consideration. They haven't passed that amendment, but in that amendment, they actually delete the 0 to 20 committee, but they leave in the requirement for a report of the 0 to 20 committee, I guess not committee, 0 to 20, what is it, like what's happening with from first steps or early Head Start or whatever it is, up into the workforce, for the state superintendent of education and the Department of Ed to actually provide a report annually on that effort. So it leaves in basically the purpose of that committee, but it gives it to the State Department of Ed in terms of providing a report of what's going on from ages 0 to the workforce, what's going on in our education system to get children ready for the workforce or for college, basically. We have asked for the House, to amend it to say, look, if you really want to have the 0 to 20 committee, we have all these other committees like the Education Oversight Committee, we have the Workforce Development Coordinating Council, the EDA Coordinating Council. If we could maybe merge all of those 3 into the 0 to 20 committee, let it serve as an advisory committee, and then give basically the accountability provisions on the EOC to the State Department. We've asked for that as well, but we didn't need to ask for that in the Senate or we haven't yet anyways, because right now under their amendment, they actually delete that committee. So also in that another provision or section of that bill, that we are interested in is that they added a provision. Basically, they had taken out the provision about deleting the annual inflation factor in the EFA. They have since reinserted that back in there because there was a lot of questions and concerns about that. Also, and I will just say, many of the changes, that relates to the teacher salary schedule provision in that bill. And also want to say that most of the changes that were provided were things that the teacher had asked for, the teachers had asked for. So there was in there about the career bands, the pay bands, if you will, that was deleted in the House version. There's also, they basically reinsert the state teacher salary schedule is back in that bill. So those are, again, things that the teachers had asked for. There was a new provision added where basically, I guess, to help with teacher recruitment retention, is it allows local boards to adopt policies to have teachers that are employed in their district to be able to enroll their child in the school that they're teaching in. Many districts have that now, but it's just basically was added in this bill. And another provision that deals specifically with school boards in the bill, this is it's going to be very complicated to explain, but in the original bill, school boards were directed to adopt policies that says, school board members are free to talk about for any actions that had taken place during a public school board meeting. They could talk about policies, but it said, except for those things that are discussed in executive session. And this particular provision really was addressing the issue of a lot of school boards have those policies where the chair is the spokesperson for the board. And so they're basically saying, feel free, individual school board members, to talk about anything you want to that happened at a school board meeting or about a policy. And I will just say that most board policies that direct the chairman to be the spokesperson does not prohibit any individual board member from speaking up. They can certainly do that. So basically, the Press Association came and said, well, that provision about exempting individual board members from talking about executive session materials, we'd like to see that be deleted. Now, that doesn't exclude a board from passing a policy that says the same thing. However, you cannot, discuss things that are in executive session. I think a lot of board policies do that now, but you might want to look at that. So basically, it just says, but I will say that if you do talk about, and an individual board member wants to talk about executive session items, then you put yourself at risk of possibly putting the district in a liable situation. So therefore, that's why things are done in executive session. So they're exempted for a reason. So that provision, that amendment was made in that provision. They also, in the provision that we're very interested in, is the consolidation provision in the House. They added a criteria. So right now the House bill says that any districts that are 1,000 students or less, they are subject to mandated consolidation. They amended it to say the same thing in school districts that are have 1,000 students or less, but they also said, and that have 50% or more of their students attending schools that are rated below average and unsatisfactory. So now the criteria is 1,000 students or less, and a majority, 50% of the students, attend schools in the district that are rated as below average or unsatisfactory. Now, contrast that to the Senate. Right now, they have a Senate bill that is being that is being discussed. It's a standalone Senate bill. Whatever happens to that bill, they're planning to insert in their main education bill. And so on the Senate side, this under that bill, that standalone bill, this is where it stands now. The consolidation would only apply to school districts that are in Tier 4 counties. They would be for school districts that have 1,500 students or less, but only in Tier 4 counties, which right now, Tier 4 counties are only those counties that include, and I don't think I have that in front of me here, I'm sorry, but they're only certain counties, so they would be Clarendon, in Clarendon County, Bamberg County, Barnwell County, and there's another one. I forgot what they are, but if those districts in those counties, they are going to be consolidated. However, in that bill, it sets up a state fund, and in that fund, the state superintendent can use the state funds in order to make the consolidation happen, which means things like equalizing salaries of staff, equalizing the tax base if there is, one district that has more debt than the other. So it basically is a fund that would allow the cost to be equalized in the districts that are being consolidated. It would also allow the funds to be used to purchase or to build maybe a school, maybe a career center that could be used in incentive to consolidating those school districts. So that fund, we've asked for that fund, that if it is not funded, then the consolidations do not occur. But there's basically about, in that bill right now, there's basically about, 3 years for the consolidation to take place. And again, those funds need to be in there to be able to help equalize those costs, or at least to make those costs not be as bad for taxpayers, and also for facilities. So that's where that bill is now. It still has to get through full committee, but if it does, again, if it passes, that's what the Senate is planning to do for the section of the consolidation section in that bill. I have a question here. Okay, who specific should we contact in the House and Senate? Right now, in the House, you need to specifically contact the members of your local delegation in the House, because that bill, again, is hitting the House floor tomorrow. They probably won't debate that bill because they have a rule about it being in there 24 hours. So, but certainly Wednesday, they will take this bill up. And so if you would contact members in your local delegation in the House and ask them for these changes. Again, hopefully I will be able to get those two out to everyone today, if not first thing tomorrow. But we are actually putting together a table that shows what's happened in the House and the Senate and kind of what our talking points and questions are for you to ask. So you don't want to hit the Senate right now, for example, on provisions that they've already tweaked that the House hasn't. So it's right now, because there are different things that are going on, they're not the same talking points for the House that they are for the Senate, if that makes sense. Okay, contacting all of our members if important, but who in leadership needs to hear from us? And again, in the House, it's your members. They're going to vote on this. So on the Senate right now, I would just say the members of the subcommittee, we've already been to the leadership in the House. We've had Scott and I've had a meeting with the Speaker of the House twice. And so, we've asked for those changes. What we've asked for, some of that's gotten in, some of it hasn't, but we're at the point now where it's on the floor. So we've got to contact our House members to talk about that. All right. So it's another question. Even though the House bill is fast-tracked, do we still believe the Senate will not rush this through and could carry over to next session? Well, I don't know about that. I can tell you this, that those regional meetings that they've planned, the Senate has planned, they go through the end of March. I mean, they're to the end of March. And then keep in mind, then the Senate's going to have to take up the budget, because the House will have passed the budget by then, and so the Senate will be working on the budget. So who knows? We'll see. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. That's why we have to keep fighting for the things that we want changed in this bill in the Senate, and we need to make sure we get it changed in the House as best as we can. To be honest with you, I'm not real optimistic that we're going to get a lot of the changes in the House that we'd like, but we still have to try. So again, contact your House members today and tomorrow. And again, I hope to have those talking points to you, especially on these major sections that we want to get changed. I'll have those out to you hopefully today or tomorrow for sure. All right, so that bill, I'm going to get to the, I think, do we have time? I'm going to get to the budget. Okay, so in the House, the budget passed the Ways and Means Committee, and it'll be taken up by the House next week. Again, invite everyone to come to TUDAC that can be here. They'll take it up on the floor next week, and so we really want you all to be there. So in the budget, it's pretty short. For the K-12 education part of that budget, we are looking at getting $159 million more. Every bit of that money is going to pay for a 4% teacher pay raise and to move the starting salary from $32,000 to $35,000. There is no additional dollars that have been, no additional unencumbered dollars, state dollars being provided to local school districts. Now, what this means is there's no money to help districts pay for the local step increase that is required of local districts, and that is a huge cost. We have been saying that is a huge cost for school districts. You're not going to have any new state dollars to help pay for other expenses, other cost of living, cost of increases that you have from year to year, electricity and all those operating kind of expenses that you have. So as far as we know, though, in terms of the budget that's on the House floor, it will continue to pay. I had a question about that last week, but I did find out that it will continue to pay the same amount that you got this year and the year before. That 1% increase of employer contribution rate that increases by another 1%. There's funding in that, and also there is funding for the increase in health premiums that are going up as well, only for those that we covered in the current year. So I don't know that the funding actually covers all employees in the school district, but it covers those teachers that are identified in the system that your district currently receives for the current year and for the last couple of years, I believe. So you might want to ask your school business officials if it did cover everyone, and so what you might be potentially looking at if it does not cover every employee. So again, we're going to ask for that on the floor of the House when the budget is debated. We're asking for some House members to put up amendments that would try to increase the base student cost. As you know, the other thing that the Ways and Means Committee did is that they basically struck from the proviso the word base student cost, and they inserted this new name called Aid to Classrooms, and provides a figure where they basically took the current base student cost. They added in the $159 million, divided it by weighted purple units, and came up with this new figure of $3,000, $3,400, which makes it, if you weren't looking at it closely, you'd say, oh my goodness, we're fully funding the base student cost, and we are not. We are not doing that. I think Becky's in the room with me here. I don't know if did we forward the article that was in the State House report where they talked about this issue, and I'm quoted. Okay, if you look on our Facebook page, we did share an article where basically it states that that's what they did with the base student cost, and it's not really the base student cost anymore. The major concern that we have in that proviso as well is that they also strike out that inflationary factor again. That that annual increase that should be in there to address increased costs by the state. That's been also deleted as well. So I'm very concerned about that. Of course, we're grateful for teachers to be able to get a 4% pay increase. We need to do so. We've got to address the teacher pay increase, but we also recognize that we have costs that go along with that in the districts, and for those districts that do not, especially those districts that don't have fiscal autonomy and cannot raise those local dollars, they potentially can be looking at possibly cutting teachers or cutting programs or cutting other staff as well. So big concern. We're going to be looking to the Senate. The Senate, a couple of senators made the comment last week, that it's very frustrating that the Senate has to be the one to add these dollars. And of course, we're going to be asking the Senate for additional dollars. The other thing in the House that are positive things is they do add more funding for school buses, the school bus lease purchase as well, and also put in some money for instructional materials that were asked for, but again, far below, though, in terms of total allocation, far below what the state superintendent had requested in her budget, and so certainly far below what we would like to see in the budget. But we are grateful for what we can get. Don't want to come across as not being grateful, because we certainly are, because they could have given nothing. So grateful for that, but we are very concerned about trying to get some more dollars, state dollars, to help districts be able to cover those step increases, because we know that is a huge part of a school district's budget. Also have a question, another question from Miss Queenie in Lee County. As for executive session, are we asking that it be mandated to remain non-reported to the public and just left it up to local board policy to say this? Yeah, you pretty much, but keep in mind that we have a State Freedom of Information Act, which does exempt public disclosure of certain things. So most board policies say, that you're going to follow the Freedom of Information Act. So a lot of, obviously, what's discussed in executive session are those things that are exempt from public disclosure under the state law. But, and I think, to me, you can ask your attorney, but I'm not an attorney. I play one on TV. But it says most of those policies do say, adheres to the state's Freedom of Information Act. And I agree. Ms. Boyd says this needs to be clear for everyone, all over the state. We don't need misunderstanding of the laws. Absolutely correct, 100%. Would echo that. It does need to be clear. So maybe revisit that policy to see exactly what it says. But clearly, things that are discussed in executive session should be exempt under the State Freedom of Information Act now. And so therefore, anything that's discussed in regards to those exemptions should not be shared unless, some action is taken. Obviously, the action is certainly something that is done in public. So, but I do agree with you, Ms. Boyd. It does need to be clear. So revisit that policy to make sure that what you intend as a board not to be discussed in terms of those things that are exempted under law, that's very clear in your policy. So I would certainly recommend that. All right. All right. So moving on to what happened in the General Assembly, just a couple of minor things here. There is a bill that's in the House, and you just need to know about this because it does impact the operation of districts. A bill that was reported out favorably in the Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee, and it's going to be on the House floor this week, would require employers, school districts, to provide a space for employees who are it's called the Lactation Support Act for expressing milk, women who are expressing milk, that the employer must provide workers with reasonable break time and space to express milk. So it does say that it is unpaid break time, or you would allow your staff member who already has break time to do that. But the key there is that the space, privacy space, must be provided to that employee. That again is going to the House floor. That bill, and then also in the Senate last week, the state superintendent did speak to the K-12 subcommittee, finance committee, to provide her budget request. And she is asking for $50 million for that incentive fund, that consolidation incentive fund that I talked about earlier, where those funds help to pay for consolidation costs. She's asking for that fund to be created and funded at $50 million, so that those consolidations can take place. And also, I will say that I think, again, I think I did say that there is like a 3-year time frame before the actual consolidation takes place for these specific districts, but it is narrowed in terms of those districts that are looking at consolidation on the Senate side. She's also asked for a $218 million increase to the base student cost under the way the base student cost is now in the law, that is, not in the proviso, of $162 per student to bring the base student cost up to $2,600. And let me just say, I think that to put in context of what $159 million does, so she's asking for $218 million to increase the base student cost by $162 per student, which would bring the total to $2,600 per student. Now, that is still below, that would still be below what the EFA requires to be funded for next school year. But the point I'm trying to make there is that the House added the House Ways and Means Committee added $159 million, and all of a sudden this figure goes to $3,400. That's, the math is not adding up. So if you don't hear anything there, there's no way you can add $159 million and then have the base student cost, or what was the base student cost, all of a sudden be at $3,400 or whatever it is. That just, if it clearly here, $218 million would only make it $2,600. All right, she's also asking for $154 million in the EIA to provide a 5% teacher pay raise. Also $42 million for buses, and $2.4 million to allow for students to receive industry certification and credentials. That process is an expensive process, and we're having more students getting the opportunity to get those credentials, and so she's asking for an increase in that funds as well, $60 million in instructional materials, and $5.2 million to add 19 more teachers in that virtual SC program that provides classes, high school classes to school districts online. In the Senate Medical Affairs Committee, there is a mold. It did pass the House. It's a House bill. The subcommittee gave a favorable rating report to that bill. It'll be now go to the full committee in the Senate, but it's passed the House. It's basically a committee, a study committee to study mold abatement and remediation. And they're going to specifically look at the impact of mold on South Carolina school children. But that is a study committee, and that is on the way probably to the Senate floor as well. So that's really what happened pretty much in the legislature last week. Again, a lot going on, but be on the lookout. I would say be on the lookout again for those talking points on the big education reform bill, and an update kind of showing you where the bill is at in the House and the Senate. Okay, another question. Oh, Christine Lee will be attending the McCormick meeting tonight Thank you, Christine. Thank you very much for that. In addition to thanking them, any specific questions we should ask? I would say, again, I would talk about for us, the big issues are those takeover provisions in that section. Really would like to see them not have we don't need another transformation school district. We don't need these private education management organizations operating these schools. What we're asking for is just to allow what is currently in the state approved plan in regards to accountability that we currently have, and that is for lower performing schools, those schools in the bottom 5% and the 10%. The state superintendent of education, the State Department of Education, provides these tiered technical assistance, which does get more aggressive, if you will, the longer that they don't improve. But basically, it allows the State Department of Education to provide that technical assistance, to be able to take over those schools. However, we would like for, again, a provision in that to allow the local school boards to at least appeal a decision, again, because if changes are made to the accountability system and you make it even difficult for challenging schools to get better, if you're changing the system, there needs to be an appeal process for that. So definitely on the Senate side, they haven't gotten to that section yet in Columbia, but for these regional meetings, the whole bill is being offered up for any questions. So if you would talk about that section to please allow that we don't support a transformation school district. We don't need another statewide school district. We already have enough at the state level with the state charter school. Now we have the Erskine authorizers. We have all of these EOC, all these other committees. We need to allow the State Department to provide that technical assistance, and for the state superintendent, if necessary, to take over the management of the schools. It still leaves the school board. It still leaves the school board intact. It still leaves that district in those schools in that district to be able to get the help that it needs. And she has said that she is having much success in these schools that she is currently working in. So we support that rather than basically dissolving the schools, dissolving the district, transferring them into this new statewide district. And instead, those are local schools with local, community involvement. The board is the voice for those. And if you remove those schools, that is just very not a good thing. So, and certainly we've taken the position that we do not support the takeover of school districts. Certainly would not go even further to say that we would support the dissolving of these schools to go to another entity, either an education management organization or to a statewide school district. If you could share those concerns, that would be great. And also, in terms of consolidation, another issue that school boards are very concerned about is to say that we do appreciate the Senate bill that is currently going through the system. And we understand then whatever is done with that bill, they're going to insert it in this main big bill here. That we do thank them for the lot of the discussion that's around the consolidation, and that we support that. We would ask, and we're going to continue to ask. We've already asked that we had asked in that bill. Don't think we're going to get it, but we had asked that bill include the local board to be able to hold a referendum to allow for a vote for consolidation, because that is in our position statement, as the association's position statement. We believe that consolidation is done best when there is local buy-in. We've also asked for a provision in there that if a local school district is performing well, it's fiscally efficient, and just because they're 1,000 students or they're 1,500 students, that if they're doing well, that they ought to have a waiver provision. That a school district that can show they're doing well. Why are we fixing something that isn't broken? So So we've asked for that as well. So 2 things on the consolidation. We're asking that, that there be a referendum allowed in that bill, and that we will also have a waiver provision so for school districts that are doing well. They can show they're doing well academically, they can show they're doing well financially, then why are we forcing consolidation? So that really is the main areas. You may have other areas that you want to talk to the Senate about. Again, if you read the update that I sent out Friday, I kind of talk about what's in the amendment that's in this, that the Senate is currently now looking at. It hasn't passed, but there's a lot of good things in that amendment. You might want to talk about some of those as well, that we're, we certainly support the amendment as it is now in terms of deleting the Student Bill of Rights. We're very concerned about the Bill of Rights that's in that provision, because even though it is not supposedly not something that's legally actionable, in other words, to be sued by a party to get damages, it's implied. It's certainly implied, and there's a lot of broad language in there, about students should be expected to feel mentally, physically, emotionally safe in the schools. Those are somewhat very broad and very kind of subjective kinds of things. Well, if they're actionable and I don't feel that I feel safe mentally or whatever it is, then, can I then get damages for that? So we're very, very concerned about what that sets up. The other thing is, and so where's the school bus driver's Bill of Rights, or the food service workers Bill of Rights, or the school board Bill of Rights, if you will. So we just think if you want to have a Bill of Rights, that you make it very generic and make it the Public Education Bill of Rights. But in the Senate, the current amendment that they're considering does delete that, and we're supportive of that as well. So any other provisions in that bill that you can think of that you'd like to speak on, that'd be great. And again, I hope to be able to send out some talking points on this for you later today and in the morning. So, and thank you for Christine for attending that meeting. I think it's real important that if you can and you're a school board member and attend that meeting, we'd greatly appreciate that. Okay, is there anything, I'm asking folks in the room, anything else I've forgotten? Nothing? They're being quiet because they don't want to be heard. Okay, so again, want to invite everyone. Thank you for participating. Want to invite everyone who can attend our Day at the Capitol next Wednesday. You can register online on our website. Would like to see a lot of folks. They're going to be talking about that budget. And again, I would encourage you to talk to your House members, not only about the education reform bill that they'll be taking up as early as Wednesday of this week. Want to try to get those changes in that bill. If they would support amendments that would make these changes, we urge their support for that. But also to be talking to them about the budget and the fact that the Ways and Means budget that's coming to them on the House floor has no new additional dollars for school districts other than those that are encumbered because they have to only go to the 4% teacher pay raise and to raising the starting teacher pay from $32,000 to $35,000. So if you can be talking to your House members this week, that would be great. So with that, again, thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing everyone next week, and look forward to hearing your comments, any response that you might get from talking to your House members. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for the questions, too.